Slamcast. 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 Welcome. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Slamcast. I'm your host, Greg. Let's get right into it, shall we? I hope you guys are enjoying a lovely April day. Currently looking out the window, and it is snowing. It is, as I'm recording this, I'm doing another Sunday recording this week. It is April 3rd, and it is snowing outside. And it's big flakes. What is happening right now, folks? I guess Canada is what's happening right now, but that's besides the point. What the hell? I didn't ask for snow in April. It's not even April Fool's. If it was April Fool's, they'd be like, oh, it's a funny joke. It's snowing April Fool's. It's a big trick. Nah, this isn't April Fool's. It's not a joke. I'm pissed. Not that pissed, but kind of pissed. Speaking of being pissed, I'm going to start off this week's cast of slamming with a little rant. For those of you that may not remember, I went and got some blood work done, or attempted to, day after I recorded last week. Also last week I was incredibly sick, and listening over that recording, I was exceptionally mumbly and not talking about much. I think it was the shortest episode I've ever recorded. So I apologize for that, and hopefully I can produce something better for you folks. Regardless, I roll up to the blood lab, and I'm going to call them out on this. Lifelabs is the blood work clinic that I went to. I went there on Monday, got in line, gave them my paperwork. Noticed the woman I gave my paperwork to started mumbling about something about the blood work I had to do needing to be done before 10 in the morning. And she mumbled it to the dude sitting next to her, and he seemed to not give a shit. And she seemed to shrug it off like it was fine, so she gave me the paper back. And I rolled in at about 12:05, so it was way past 10 o'clock. Very busy in there. Surprisingly busy considering how last week I talked about how these kind of services are open when everybody is working their normal 9-to-5 jobs. But regardless of that, the place was packed right at lunchtime. So I go and sit down, and I sit down for a full hour. I see people who are basically all the people who are there before me are all slowly getting whatever they're there for done, and they're slowly going away and being replaced by new people. So I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, should be close at this point. Within the last half an hour I was sitting there, I was like, most of the people who I remember seeing here when I got here are gone. So hopefully I'll be helped soon. Sorry, trying to keep my cool here, folks. Getting me riled up just thinking about it. So I sit there for a full hour, nice and patiently, nice and calmly, just, and that's the thing too about getting blood work done is you got to starve yourself until you get the blood work done for most blood work. And I did that because just a good thing to do, even if your doctor doesn't tell you it's possible. You need to fast, as they call it, but it's basically just starving yourself, which is fun. So I'm sitting here around noon, still haven't eaten, sitting there for an hour. And then finally, a woman calls my name, but instead of giving me a cubicle number, because that's what they were doing with all the other patients there, we'll call them, she says, Gregory Campbell, could you come to the front, please? So I walk up to the front, and she goes, I'm sorry, but according to these papers, you were supposed to get your blood work done at before 8 in the morning, along with before 10 in the morning for the other test. But there was one there specifically where I needed to get my blood taken before 8 in the morning. Needless to say, I wasn't happy with this, and she explained to me that apparently it was my doctor's fault because he didn't write attention on the paper. So it's not my job, and it's not their job to look at this fucking piece of paper and read it properly. No, apparently it's my doctor's fault for not writing attention, because apparently these dumb shits at this fucking lab can't just closely read something, even though they're busy. They just can't closely read something. There has to be an attention written on it so that their dumb brains can friggin' process that the word attention is on a piece of paper. Aside from all the other technical, medical mumbo jumbo on there, need to throw attention on there or else they won't pick it up. So, needless to say, I was furious. Luckily, the woman who called me up, who wasn't the woman who originally looked at my papers, she was a nice lady, and she said, all right, listen, you've been waiting here for an hour, so if you come tomorrow before 8 o'clock, like 7:30, 7:45, you'll essentially be the first in line. I wasn't planning on going there the next day at 8 in the morning. So originally I told them, I might just show up on Saturday at 8 in the morning because I was working from home that Monday I went, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to wake up super early and then either possibly go to work super early or whatever. I hadn't considered that idea. I was never told by anyone. My doctor mentioned to me that all my doctor mentioned to me when he told me to get this blood work done is I should get my blood work done in the morning, which that wasn't specific at all, so, whatever. But if they had told me when I had originally got in line and given them my paperwork, I would have been fine with that. That would have been, it would have been something I would have had to deal with. Anyways, again, getting heated, folks. I'm getting heated right now. I need to cool my jets a bit. Anyways, this woman was nice about it, and she helped me out, and she said, show up tomorrow on 7:30, 7:45, and we get your blood work done. But then I mentioned, I was like, hey, maybe I can do it on Saturday, and she turned to her coworker who was there, and she was like, all right, Sophie or Sophia or whatever her name was, she was like, she'll be here on Saturday. You make sure you see her when you show up Saturday. I ended up going home and just not coming to terms with it, but just being like, whatever, I'll just go tomorrow morning. Because she said, the one who called me to the front desk said she would be there Tuesday morning. So I show up Tuesday morning. I get in line. The same bitch who originally looked over my papers and completely ignored everything about them. I gave her the papers. And she basically didn't give a shit. She basically treated my papers like she did with the day before. So I didn't want to cause a scene. I'm not the kind of guy who likes to cause a scene. But since I had her attention, I was like, hey, I talked with somebody here yesterday. I waited here for an hour. They told me that as long as I showed up before 8, I could get my blood work done right away. This woman did not give a fuck. And it pissed me off even more. At least she gave off the impression she didn't give a shit. Luckily, the woman who helped me the day before, she was behind the desk, like perfect timing, because I saw she was running around while I was waiting in line. So by the time I got to the front desk, she was behind the desk. And I made my point to try and be loud enough so that she could hear. And even after I told the woman who didn't give a shit everything, she was like, yeah, okay, just sit down. So, but the woman who helped me was still behind the desk. So I was like, tried to like make it super clear. I was like, so will I be getting help like soon? I was told I would be first in line. Your coworker over there. And I tried pointing at her and she wasn't looking at me. Luckily, the original woman who helped me turned around and was like, oh yeah, he waited here an hour. We're going to put him at the front of the line or something. And the woman still really looked like she didn't give a shit. So if I ever see her at Lifelabs again, I'm going to punch her face in. No, I'm not going to punch her face in. I just probably won't ever go to that Lifelabs ever again, even though the woman who helped me ended up taking my blood and she seemed like a lovely lady. And I also got the impression from her that the bitch who didn't give a shit about my papers sounds like she doesn't give a shit about a lot. I was just kind of getting that impression about her from what we were talking about and with the apologizing that the woman who helped me was giving me as she was taking my blood and as she was finishing up with me. So she was a lovely lady. Don't know if I'll ever go back to that location. Because fuck that. Also, another little thing I want to mention about getting my blood work done. First time I got my blood work done, the first time I mentioned it a few weeks ago, I'm pretty sure they only took like 1 or 2 vials of blood out of me. And then this time around, this 8 a.m. gig, I looked over and there was like 6 to 8 vials worth of what I'm pretty sure was my blood because those vials weren't there before I sat down. And I like turned to the woman who was helping me and I was like, are those all mine? And she was like, well, they're not mine. And then laughed. And in my head, I was kind of like, that didn't answer my question. Like, are they mine or are they not mine? Anyways, that's my rant. Fuck that shit. I'm out. I'm going to move on from there. Give me something to just calm me down a little bit. Excuse me. Some other things we can talk about. One thing I want to talk about right now, since it's fresh in my mind. I went out yesterday and I saw Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. And honestly, one thing I want to bring up first, because I was planning on recording this yesterday, but then I was planning on going to see the movie yesterday, so I was either going to have some sort of transition. I was either going to record before and after the movie. But I got pretty busy on Saturday, so I decided to just drop all that. But there's one point I wanted to bring up over this past week, which was Batman v Superman's been getting a lot of hate and been getting shit on a lot by a lot of critics, whether it's just normal movie critics or even YouTube movie reviewer type personalities. And there's also been a lot of people not necessarily praising the movie, but being like, guys, it's not as bad as everybody else is making it out to be. And I honestly feel like because of how critically panned Batman v Superman was, I honestly feel like that helped its sales. I know the marketing behind it helped its sales a shit ton because it made like a shit ton of money in its first like weekend alone. But honestly, when it first came out, I saw that it got kind of critically panned and I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to watch it anymore. But then, because I wasn't worried about watching it anymore, I ended up listening to a podcast. These group of guys that I normally listen to, and they were basically spoiling a lot of stuff about the movie. They made it clear at the beginning of their podcast that they were going to spoil a lot Batman v Superman. But then as they were discussing it, because of how much crazy shit that they were talking about that happens in this movie, I was kind of just like, I have to go and see this movie. So essentially, because of how critically panned it was, I ended up wanting to see it for a mix of A, wanting to see how badly of a train wreck it actually was, and B, there's a lot of like, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a lot of like weird reveals that are kind of poorly written into the movie. And just, I kind of want to talk about the movie, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone because I feel like even though I might have not seen the movie as early as I did because of all the stuff I heard about, I feel like being surprised by some of it would be cooler, not knowing about it ahead of time. But yeah, I'd suggest people go see it, especially with the slew of Marvel movies that have been coming out over the last few years. It's definitely a breath of fresh air. It's definitely different enough from the Marvel formula that we've been getting. And by Marvel formula, I mean more Marvel origin formula. All those movies are really starting to weigh down on me in the sense that I'm kind of getting bored with them. Deadpool was good because it was written non-linearly, and I felt like that really helped it. But especially because what we're expecting Black Panther and Doctor Strange, next year or this year? I don't know. I can't remember. But I don't know how I'm going to feel about those, especially if they're extremely similar to all the other origin stories that we've gotten in the last few years with Marvel. But seeing how this is kind of an origin for Batman, as I like to refer to him as Bat Affleck, and Wonder Woman. Essentially weird sort of origins for those. It's kind of a breath of fresh air. But yeah. I also noticed that the movie, not saying anything spoilery, I noticed that the movie, for the most part, while I'm watching it, it's definitely one of those movies where as you're watching it, you're like, yeah, okay, this all kind of makes sense for the most part. There are a few parts that are kind of like, weird. But for the most part, while I was watching it, I was kind of like, yeah, no, this all makes sense. As it's happening and as it's unfolding, I was kind of like, yeah, this all more or less makes sense. But then, and I highly suggest you do this, if you see it with one person or a group of people, I highly suggest after you watch it, just to discuss the movie in general, like just discuss the story of it. I noticed doing that with the buddy I went to go see the movie with. Shout out to Robbie. As we were discussing, like, at first it was kind of like, oh, the movie wasn't that bad. I don't get why critics hated it and why some people really hate it. And it's like, yeah, well, this part was weird. And now that I think about it, this part was kind of weird. And then I think about it because those parts were weird. This part's kind of weird. And then it all kind of just like crumbles beneath itself. Like we were just kind of being like, this doesn't make sense. And this kind of doesn't make sense. And we were essentially just listing off stuff. Regardless, I thought it was a pretty good movie. If you're into the whole cinematic universe of DC and Marvel, I'd say check it out for sure. But if you're not a huge superhero movie fan, you're probably not going to get much out of it. But yeah, there were definitely, from what I was expecting, there was definitely some really cool scenes in there that I say make the movie worth watching. And just because it's kind of funny to kind of laugh at this movie as well. Like with some of the stuff that happens in it. It like kind of turns into like a half comedy with like how serious it takes itself in some parts. And you're kind of just like, this is ridiculous. But anyways, that's my thoughts on it. I feel like if I keep talking about it, I'm just going to be going in circles here. Also, since we're talking about comic book stuff, I wanted to talk about this. I don't know why I didn't talk about it. Like I said, last week my mind was all over the place. So I really didn't talk about a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. But I finished up season 2 of Daredevil. And if you liked season 1, I'd highly suggest you check it out. The ending is probably the weaker part of the season. Like the last few episodes, they get a little weaker. Not to say they're bad by any means, but in my opinion, the first 4 episodes of season 2 can honestly play out like a miniseries. Like they're so well written together, and then not to say after that it drops significantly in quality at all or anything, but those first 4 episodes definitely mash well together, and there are definitely a lot of other scenes and episodes after that are really awesome. But the ending feels kind of like the weakest part of the season. I don't want to say anything to spoil anything. But yeah. Don't expect anything. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say that. That's just how I felt about it. Regardless, season 2 was probably the better of the 2 seasons. I don't know. I'd have to rewatch season 1 of Daredevil. But I feel like season 2 is definitely on par with it. It's definitely not worse. But yeah, I just want to let that out there because I feel like I've mentioned that show a few times. Might as well give it a bit of a synopsis on it. I also feel like I should, I don't know, get some more guests on and do a sort of spoiler cast on stuff like this. Not necessarily comic book cinematic stuff, since that's honestly what I've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. But because I feel like bringing it up halfway through my Slamcast would be kind of shitty for fans, or not fans, but shitty for listeners who haven't gotten around to seeing whatever I'm talking about, because the way my format currently runs, I mean, I could do this with my YouTube uploads, but I couldn't do this with my Spreaker uploads, which is get some sort of way to jump cut, unless I edit it in later, some sort of me being like, I'm going to talk about this, but skip ahead to, and then me editing later being like, 25 minutes in, if you want to, you know what I mean? Like, skip ahead to 25 minutes, 32 seconds if you want to skip all of my Daredevil or all of my Batman v Superman spoilers. I guess I could attempt that, but God, I'm lazy. I am lazy. Also, I don't want to make the episode turn in. I don't want to make an episode turn into a on the spot sort of review of a movie, especially if it's something that some of you guys don't give a shit about. Because I know some people don't give a shit about superhero movies and superhero comic book type stuff. Anyways, what do you guys think? Maybe I'll get a few people on. We can talk about both Daredevil Season 2 and Batman v Superman. That doesn't sound like a bad idea, honestly. 15 minutes one, 15 minutes the other, half an hour one, half an hour the other. That'd be actually a pretty good idea. Maybe we should get that going within the next few weeks. Regardless, I'm also super excited for Civil War. That seems like it's going to be dope. And honestly, before seeing Batman v Superman, I kind of didn't care about Suicide Squad. But now that I've seen Batman v Superman, it's actually got me really excited for where the DC universe is going to go. I hope some of their writing and editing gets a little better. You guys will know what I mean after watching Batman v Superman. Honestly, the production of that movie is fairly good. It's just some of the directing and writing and some of the scenes that they cram in there are really just sort of weird. Like, honestly, I feel like for a majority of this movie, I could not myself edit it, but well, I guess I could edit it myself, but I'm pretty shitty at editing videos, so I don't know how good I'd be able to do it. But I feel like there's a lot of scenes that I could cut out and kind of move scenes around in different places to kind of make the story more coherent and less like, what? Why does that happen over there? But then the ending kind of, I don't know how I personally could edit the ending to make it better, because I feel like the ending could be a lot. I feel like the ending kind of needs a whole reshoot. Not necessarily the ending, but I guess the ending. Yeah, there's a whole. I should really get a spoiler cast going for Batman v Superman and maybe Daredevil too, but because I don't want to turn this whole episode into a spoiler cast on its own, because basically all I've been talking about. Greg, change the subject. Everybody stopped giving a shit 5 minutes ago. All right, changing the subject. Last week I also didn't bring this up, and I don't know why. I didn't write it down in my notes, and I should have. I played Settlers of Catan for the first time in my life. And boy, oh boy, that's a pretty awesome game. I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty, I don't want to say I'm a pretty big fan of board games, but I'm always down to play a board game if it's around. I kind of want to invest in board games, but I feel like I don't really have the people to play it with, at least not right now anyways. And I feel like when you're in university, everybody's too stressed out to meet up for like an afternoon of board gaming. But I don't know, maybe. But yeah, I played Settlers of Catan with my family over Easter, of all holidays. Speaking of which, I gotta talk about April Fools. It's part of my tradition that I made up in my head about how I have to essentially rate holidays and then say how they could be improved. I should talk about April Fools. I'll talk about that right after this. Yeah, I played Settlers with my family, and most of us didn't know how to play. I didn't know how to play. It was basically my brother just teaching everybody how to play. And honestly, that game gets pretty intense and pretty fun. I'd suggest it for anybody who's willing to put in a bit of money to get the to purchase the game, and also would suggest the expansion pack, which we also had on us. Which honestly, I think it's pretty hilarious how a board game can have an expansion pack that literally is just the expansion pack to expand the number of players that you could play with. I think that's pretty hilarious, but also pretty awesome at the same time, because I feel like most other mediums and games, you can't really do that. Like maybe video games, but a lot of people would be like, "What? Why can't you just make that a free update? Why do I have to pay money for that?" But with Settlers of Catan, it's kind of like, "Oh, you're giving me more pieces and stuff," so that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I'd like to play it again. It was pretty rad. I was super close to winning, and then my sister won. It pissed me off. For those of you that don't know, you need these things called victory points, and you get them through making more settlements and having development cards. Development cards. Need the specific cards that also give you more victory points, and then there are these two you can have longest road and biggest army, and those also give you victory points. And I played out this massive turn of just building and trading and making more settlements, and I don't even know what happened. All in one turn I was just like trading up a bunch of stuff and putting down stuff and trading stuff and putting down stuff. And then next thing I know, I had 9 victory points, and my sister had 8. And then before I even had a chance to have another turn, she put down some more shit and won. And I was pissed. Right, pissed. This is the pissed episode. Maybe we should call it that. Even though I wasn't pissed about Batman vs. Superman. I mean, okay. Final words about Batman vs. Superman for the time being. Just to make it clear. It's not the greatest superhero movie ever, by all means. It's very, very far from that. But it's also not at all the worst superhero movie ever. And it's definitely different from the Marvel-ness that we're used to of like, oh, there's Batman, Superman, and it's serious. It's a super serious time. But yeah, I'm going to stop talking about that. Settlers of Catan, fun stuff. I'd like to play more board games. For some reason, I've noticed, I don't want to say on the internet, but there are a few people that I follow on Twitter who are kind of board game buffs. Like they help with board game websites and stuff. And man, do they hate Cards Against Humanity. And I don't get it. It's just like this weird thing where it's like, oh, everybody thinks Cards Against Humanity is like basically like that edgy edgelord simulator game. And it's like, yeah, kind of, but it's like that's part of its charm. Like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes Cards Against Humanity gets flack when it shouldn't. It's a fun game with the right people. Just to make that clear, with the right people. Played Cards Against Humanity, I think twice with my mom, or once. No, I think it was twice. Whew. you'd be surprised what your family can throw down when a game of Cards Against Humanity is on the table. All right, so April Fools. I don't even have it in my notes. I should have had it in my notes, folks. Folks notes, folks. April Fools. It's a fun time. I used to try to do little goofs and gaffs when I was younger on April Fools, and they'd always work out pretty well. I don't really do them that much anymore. This year I didn't even do anything. I should have done something dumb, stupid, awesome, funny, but I didn't. I think I was the fool a few times this year. I was had, and I was the fool. But I also like the weird turn that the internet's kind of been doing over the last few years with April Fools, where like April Fools turns into this like weird marketing day for like big tech companies mostly. Like a lot of video game companies like to like bring out videos that are like, we're doing a goofy thing. Oh, it's just an April Fool's joke. Even though half of it's kind of like, no, please make that. Like there was this game Far Cry 3 that came out with an expansion called Blood Dragon. And I believe they announced it on April 1st. And essentially the whole expansion is like this weird 80s take on the game. And it's like just a whole joke about like, oh, it's so 80s and like laser dragons and stuff, and everybody's like, holy shit, this is super cool, too bad it's an April Fool's prank. And then the people who made it were kind of like, oh, it's not a joke, it's happening. And everybody was like, awesome. But like every other April Fool's joke with like video game developers, it's always like, oh, that's cool, I wish that would happen. And then the game developers are like, yeah, but it's not. And everybody's like, oh, okay, that's cool. But then you have like YouTube and Google also who are like, oh, we're gonna do a goofy thing. And then for those of you that don't know, Google messed up so badly this year. They added some weird button that would add a minion dropping a mic gif to your email and send the email within the same like second you hit the button. And apparently it replaced a button that was like send and like archive. Like there was no more send and archive button or something. So people were hitting that button by an accident, and like a lot of people were pissed because they were like losing business because they were like sending super serious business emails that had like minions dropping microphones, and it was like, oh, Google did an actual prank even though they didn't mean to, and everybody's pissed. Which I honestly think is pretty hilarious, even though I'm sure somebody might have lost their job over that. I hope they didn't, but I'm sure somebody got in a lot of shit for that. Or maybe nobody did. Maybe the entirety of Google was just like, shit. Uh-oh. But yeah. I think that's pretty hilarious. And YouTube had a Snoop-O-Vision where it was like it would turn some videos very specific, like a dozen really popular videos were turned into 3D videos, except it was in a movie theater, and the movie that you selected was playing in the movie theater. And then somewhere in the theater was like Snoop Dogg being all like, yo, this video's fucking insane. And like a bunch of white Silicon Valley nerds being like, Snoop Dogg, you're funny. We're relatable. And it's like, God. I watched one and people were like basically trying to like connect with Snoop, sort of. They were kind of be like, oh, this is crazy. Isn't that right, Snoop Dogg? And it's like, geez. Like, just why do you have to have these like Silicon Valley friggin' programmers or marketing engineers or whatever the hell you want to call them, like sitting next to Snoop Dogg and be like, yeah, this is cool, this is rad, guys. And Snoop Dogg's just like, I'm getting paid a shit ton of money for this. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Either way, it was pretty hilarious. So yeah, April Fools, my verdict or my thoughts on changing April Fools. I don't think April Fools needs to be changed. I think it's pretty awesome right now. I like how the internet likes to do a lot of fake marketing and stuff. And like everybody's worried about like what news is real and what isn't, which is also hilarious. But yeah, I like it because marketing on the internet gets super. I'm just not even talking anymore. Gets to get super stupid. You just make a whole bunch of garbage, and it's like, all right, this is pretty awesome. Just new stuff coming out. Also, another thing too, for people who use the website reddit.com, I also noticed a lot of subreddits like started getting in on it this year. At least the ones that I followed. Like, so let me line this up. YouTube Haiku, which is a subreddit meant for super short YouTube videos, mostly humorous super short YouTube videos, turned into an all Spider-Man videos thread but all Spider-Man subreddit that day. All the videos were in some way related with Spider-Man, which I thought was friggin' hilarious. Another subreddit called Reaction GIFs turned into which is, to let me explain, a subreddit where everybody just posts GIFs based on reactions, like my reaction when a thing happened, and then there's a GIF kind of thing. All the actual GIFs were just based on wrestling GIFs. So it was just like Macho Man and Hulk Hogan and a whole bunch of other, and they were all like 80s wrestlers too, which made it even funnier. All the reactions were like my reaction when blah, blah, blah. And it was just like Macho Man being like, "Ooh, yeah, coming at ya." Shit like that, which I thought was hilarious. And then there was a third. Oh, yeah. Subreddit called Black People Twitter, which is essentially a subreddit based around funny tweets that black people make. And as you could tell, that subreddit is filled with white people. Or at least I'm pretty sure it's just filled with white people, because it's Reddit. But that whole subreddit was just quote-unquote black people tweets, but all of the tweets involved SpongeBob pictures, because most of the tweets in that subreddit involve like pictures to go with the tweet, but like as part of the tweet. But all of them were just SpongeBob related, which I thought was amazing. And me and my buddy Eric, shout out to Eric, both kind of realized that we live in a glorious time filled with dank memes, and I never want it to change, even though it will, and it'll change for the better, and the memes will get danker. And on that note, folks, I'm going to end this week's Slamcast. I bid you a farewell, a hopefully warm day whenever you're listening to this. Unless you're listening to this when I upload it, then it's probably also snowing wherever the hell you are. But, have a good day, have a good night, have a good week. I'll speak to you next time. Outro Greg, take us out. Well, folks, that's all we have for this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for whatever crazy shit we talk about. Until next time, have a good one.